Hello and welcome to Shattered Lives, Reach Ireland's crime podcast. I'm Paul Healy and I'm joined by a special guest today. That is Stephen Gillen. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
It's nice to be on it. It really is, speak to everyone.
Um, I could give you an introduction, but I think it's maybe best that you introduce yourself to our audience. And I know that you were, I suppose, you're a former criminal, and you have reformed your life since then, and you now do many speaking tours and interviews. But I'd rather than me going into great detail, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do now.
Yeah, Stephen Gillen, of course. I was born here, but taken over to Belfast as a small child, 6 months old. Stayed there till I was nine, in the early days, and it was really hitting it over there. With aunts and uncles. My surrogate mother died over there when I was nine. I was right in the middle of it all over there. Grew up in Divis Flats, and there was, I moved around a bit of Belfast, so I was right in the middle of all the stuff there. But then, Ireland is very much home to me. With all my family and all the rest of it. A little bit of Italian in the family, but it's mainly Irish, right?
Right.
Uh, Come over here to London. Went for a succession of children's homes. Really feral child, went into petty crime, into serious organized crime really, really quickly. Ended up went to prison, got 17 years for organized crime offences, armed robbery mainly,
Right.
shooting at police and all this stuff, serious stuff. I went down that path. Some of my out of family, they was quite high profile target criminals in the day, so it was very groomed
Mhm.
into it, as many people are, and the ones further down are. So 12 years of that as a Category A inmate. I was released as a Category A inmate, which is quite rare, as well.
Mm.
Come out, of course, I changed my life. I transformed my life. I see through that life and all that. I went on, I done a lot of voluntary work. I went on to do a business degree. 2019, I was nominated for an International Peace Prize for conflict resolution and a lot of other stuff. I've since gone on to be an entrepreneur. I've built businesses. I've got three
Mm.
books out. One of them, my latest one, Extraordinary, The Search for a Life Worth Living,
Mhm.
is now I'm a fifth of the way through filming with Netflix. They're doing
Oh
a
wow.
90-minute documentary drama on my life. They're going to dramatize 60 minutes of it, which is
Mm.
going to take me right the way back home to Ireland, as a kid and all that. So to
Mm.
understand me, they have to understand where I started, of course, right? So I've since gone on to do all that, and I'm a public speaker. I do a lot of broadcasts and stuff like that on news and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
as an expert. And I do a lot of work both sides of the camera. So I
Mm.
think that's about the long and short of it.
Extraordinary is the word, really, isn't it? I mean, you have lived an extraordinary life, and it's great that I suppose you're giving back in some way now. Is that why you do this? Is that why you speak out in the way that you do? Because I suppose are you trying to right the wrong in a way?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was positioned for a bad start. I'm not the excuses guy. I'm really not. It's about what we do next, of course, But that kind of a life when you set up for it, with the poverty, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I started in a slum where, it was very normal to hear people shooting it out from the flats all night, right? It was a war zone. It was not normal, there was a lot of violence, but Ireland's a wonderful place. We're wonderful people. It's a very magical place. That was always in me. It's just a pity of, all the stuff we had to go through, the trauma of it all. But
Mm.
then coming here, of course, I was set up for a lot of it as well. And, the
Mm.
brutal children's homes and all that stuff. And, going on, from petty crime into organized crime. So it was about changing that narrative. Do you
Mm.
know what I'm saying? Getting away from the past. Of course, there's a lot of redemption in it as well, and it is about that development as a human being, and of course, giving back, and
Mm.
that's what it's about, to be a human being.
Can I ask you? I mean, I could talk to you for hours about the life that you've lived, but and it might be hard to sum it up, but in terms of how you got involved in criminality, and you've suggested to me there that you were groomed, I suppose. How did that come about? Specifically organized crime. How did you get into the more serious stuff? I mean, how did that come about?
Well, it's very subtle, always like this, you know. And for me, I can only speak for myself. Don't forget, I'd been dehumanized in Ireland, you know, in the middle of a war zone, you know. But bombs and guns was a normal way of life for me, which of course is not. But for me, it was. I didn't know anything else. You
Yeah.
know, I see someone shot and killed in front of me when I was seven. You know, crying for his mother, all of this kind of stuff. You know, it shadows the welfare in some ways. It's not a normal upbringing. But when I kind of went on, then forward, you know, I was kind of like a feral child, so I was susceptible to that because I was searching to belong. I was searching for a family. I was a very angry child, you
Mm.
know, a bit crazy as well. I always thought I was a bit different.
Right, yeah.
So I was like, you know, I was really susceptible to that, and you know, they had the ingredients, you know, ingredients of having to survive, still being a kid, you know, and then having some of the out of family who was target criminals who embrace me and you know give you all the chat. Then it
Hmm.
was really easy to fall into that.
And with that came money, I imagine, and a lifestyle that it was probably well, I won't say easy, but it was a way to get yourself out of that poverty, was it?
Look, it's all of them things, you know, and it can be
Mm,
very beguiling, right? You know,
mm,
you know, the older ones, they're the ones with all the money, all the cars, carefree, all the women, all the rest of it. It's
mm,
very seductive, right? You know, these are the role models of the day. Of
mm,
course, it's the wrong message and the wrong role models, but when you're
mm,
a young child and you're really stuck into that, and
mm,
then you know, it's very easy to see where you say, well, this is the way I need to go with that.
mm. And you mentioned when you were only 7 years of age, you witnessed a murder. You saw someone be shot in front of you. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, I see a lot of that stuff. I mean, in Belfast in them days, it would just kick off like that, you know. And I went
Hmm.
out, you know, a riot kicked off, you know, the army, you know, turned up. You know, the IRA was shooting from the flats. It started heavy fire and all this stuff. Everyone ran. You know, there was you know, a bus on the side of the road in flames. This is kind of normal
Yeah.
stuff in a way there as well. You know, so everyone ran over, ran behind a hedge as you do as a, you know, a kid. That road, you'd be killed on that road than that was, and of course you know, the shooting there and. You know, I
Mm,
see a younger guy, you know, balaclava, you know, it would have been IRA or something like that. And, you
mm,
know, he'd come out, he was shooting at them. He took two shots in the chest, lifted him straight off his feet in front of me. You
mm,
know, I mean, you know, all blood coming out of his mouth, all the rest of it, calling for his mother. You know, I watched him. I was stuck there with him for about 20 minutes while he was dying. You know, and we couldn't move. That was the worst of it. That was
jeez.
terrible for me, obviously. I mean, I was seven, you know.
Hmm. Um, if you don't mind me asking, what side of things I suppose your family fell down on, and at that stage, look, it was you were either Catholic or Protestant, you're loyalist or but Republican. We've well moved on from those times, but you mind me asking you about that and just
Well, we was Catholic, do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Roman
yeah,
Catholic. We was brought up like that, and we always, you know, we was always, you know, we didn't get involved in the politics. But you
hmm,
know, obviously, I was a young child anyway. But you all have family and like different stuff. You know, most people had family who was connected to something
yeah,
somewhere in some way, right?
mm,
You know, and Ireland's got you know a really long history of this, hundreds of years. It's a beautiful place, you know, beautiful people, you know, it is,
mm,
you know, we want better and move on, but, you know,
mhm.
sometimes that's not so easy.
Yeah, but I suppose I just wondered that, growing up in that atmosphere, a tribal atmosphere, and very much, you take one side or the other. I mean, that must shape your mentality going forward, and I suppose seeing things as in that kind of a way, the good guys, bad guys kind of way, or did that have an impact on your mentality in terms of what you got involved in later in life, you know?
No, absolutely. I mean, it was, anti-authority was the thing. They're not to
Mm.
be trusted. You can't really trust anyone, right?
Yeah,
But they're definitely not to be trusted. We're here and they're there, and all these divides have been created, right?
yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard to get out of that. That well, it was then.
Mm.
As a young kid, I didn't know anything about the world, and of course, you're going forward. Much
Mm.
years later, when you're wiser, of course, you know how these things are, and
Mm.
you're more experienced and have the wisdom to know the difference between these things.
Yeah. You mentioned you went to prison for 17 years for organized crime offenses. Was that a number of different charges that you were ultimately hit with, or was it a specific sentence for armed robbery, or what was the actual incident you went to prison for?
It was armed robbery. I basically, at the end, I mean, we was involved in a lot of stuff then. I mean,
Mm.
it was about the money then, from counterfeiting to
Hmm.
anything, whatever it was that was worth our time or had some money to it or some
Yeah.
kind of racket, then we'd be involved in that if it was worth our while, right? But
Mm.
for me, it was mainly them days what it was. It was armed robbery. I had 3 trials at the Old Bailey, beat the first one, beat the second one. I got guilty of a firearm in the second one, but
Yeah.
beat the conspiracy to rob. But the third one was very serious. It was a police ambush with the flying squad, and they was there. It was,
Mm.
observation. It was all that stuff, an
Hmm.
operation, and yeah, it was serious, serious stuff, and that was the end of it. I got 17 years for that.
And did you serve all 17 years? How many years were you in
No, I
prison?
done 12,
You did
12,
12 years.
12 years.
Um, and was that had you been in and out of prison before, or was that your only kind of main prison stint?
I'd done a couple of little sentences before that, but that
Mm.
was the big sentence, and that was
Mm.
12 years straight as a cat.
Mhm, mhm. And when you came out, I mean, you changed your life when you came out. What was it? What was the catalyst for you to say, I don't want to be involved in this anymore?
I mean, there was a lot, really. To be honest, I'd saw through that life, and I'd seen many of my friends been killed or in prison for the rest of their lives and all that stuff. And I've come to the stage I couldn't hurt anyone anymore, but I was intelligent enough to realize that I was worth so much more, right? And back in Ireland at that time, behind the door, I had a really good upbringing. There was really good people, the salt of the earth. Outside the door, of course, it was
Mm.
chaos. So that kind of stayed with me as well, right? And saved me in some kind of way. There was a lot of good stuff that was put into me, right? Thankfully, right?
Mm.
Which was in there, right? And yeah, there was a lot of things. I mean, I had friends of mine who I'd known for 20 years that set me up to get me killed. Now, the thing about that was it wasn't even that these people didn't know me, even they didn't, care about me, or we hadn't done, all this stuff that we'd done together, everything. It's just, in that life, if it turns against you in a certain way, it's
Mm.
that ruthless, and, who wants to live like that, right?
Mm.
I'd always played by the rules of that life when I was in that life. So
Mm.
after that sentence, I was beholden to no one. I wasn't over the barrel to anyone, and it was time for me to move on with my life.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's difficult to imagine leaving that life though, because I mean, even now when we're talking about the gangland criminals of today, and maybe in your time it was different, and maybe even in the UK as opposed to Ireland, it's different. But generally speaking, it's not easy to leave that life because you carry with it, I suppose, secrets that you have to carry, and I suppose that code of omerta for is a thing, and talking to the police and talking to the media is something that you don't do. So I mean, you must have been cognizant of all that, but also like how do you get away from that life safely and know that you're not going to be targeted as a result of like you are now speaking out so freely about the life that you lived of
Well,
crime.
when you're in that life, it's impossible
Mm.
really to leave it. I have to be honest because it's the associations, that bind. It's everything that you are and what you do, and
Mm,
right? That really locks you into that, and it's a family thing, or people you went to school with, or people you work together. So it's very, by its very nature, right? These circles you're very bound. But look, like I said, I always played by the rules of that life when I was in it. I got a long time. I done all of it, category A, because I was one of the ones who was never going to change. I was never going to change in that way. I mean, I know a lot, obviously.
mm,
We all do right about things. It's not my business. I've never told tales on other people, nor
mm.
nor would I. It's not my thing. I let sleeping dogs lie. It's not going to
Yeah.
change anything. But I had paid my dues,
Mm,
and moved on. I paid a very, very heavy price. But like I say, I wasn't beholden to anyone. I wasn't over a barrel to anyone.
yeah.
So, I can talk about my life and
Your
own
own
my stuff.
experience. Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? And,
Mhm.
that's fair enough. A lot of people, they respect that. I always had a good name,
Mhm.
regardless. And I would always keep that.
The criminal organization that you were part of was that, and I suppose this is where it comes into maybe you won't be able to speak about some things, but was it a large organization where was it a family run organization? Does it still exist? Or were you very much part of I suppose a number of different organizations in your time, gangs for lack of a better term?
Well, in them days, look, there was different kind of firms, and we certainly had one in our own right. What we was doing, which we had now. It wasn't them days, right?
Mm.
Going back in London, in the East End, and London, and wider London, and even going into Europe and so forth, and things like that, and Ireland and all that. But it was a lot of loosely connected kind of games, really, in them days. It
Yeah.
was doing the work and different stuff. We'd work together because we would know each other and all that, right? But very, very tight knit groups, which said to you, was very, very kind of put together in ways there was like family or cousins, or we'd gone to
Yeah.
school together. Like, everyone
Yeah.
kind of knew everyone and come through that way. So it was very much
Mm.
like that.
And I mean, nowadays these gangs are primarily involved in drugs. Were you involved in drugs yourself, or was it bank robberies, that type of thing, armed robberies in your day?
Look, it was always real. It was a different kind of stuff then. I mean, the cocaine and all that started to come around after. Then that,
Yeah.
it was the years, the cocaine started going into the crack, right? Getting naughty
Mm.
with all that stuff. I mean, there was times like, we meddled in, cannabis and stuff like that, but we really, we didn't really get into the class A's. That kind of come a little bit more, and that brings a lot of stuff with it, this stuff, which is
Mm.
not good, right?
Mm. Uh, would that have been a line too far for you, getting involved in the wholesale of drugs, or?
Look, I've changed my life. I always say it
Mm.
how it is because this
Mm.
is the only way to say it. And if you're
Mm.
going to find any solutions, you have to say it how it is. So I don't dress it up or anything like that. How I was before in my life, I would have been involved in anything. There was no line for me, apart from money or what we needed to do. And obviously, I didn't want to be nicked, but there
Yeah.
was a strict criminal code and conduct of the way we were in them days for sure, right? And a lot
Mm.
of unwritten rules, right? Like the
Mm.
obvious, right?
Mm.
So I hope that answers your question. But for me, I really changed my life. It's not
Yeah.
something you can be in 1 foot in or 1 foot out. You're either in or you're not.
Yeah.
This is my experience.
Interesting. It's a bit of a cheeky question, maybe. I'm sure I'm not the first to ask you, but in your time in that life, did you see people lose their life? Were you involved in things that saw people lose their lives? I mean, be
Well,
murdered.
look, what I can say on that is very, very sadly, unfortunately, I see some people lose their lives, right?
Mhm.
And that was in front of me, whether it was in prison or outside, and this is a very sad thing, no matter what went down, right? That's
Mm.
all, that I would say on that. If you're kind of in that life in that kind of a way, you're going to see this stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. Um, it's a bit of a cliche question, but I think it's important to ask you because you're on the other side of this now, and you've you've changed your ways, so to speak. There will inevitably be people out there who are going through the same process you went through. They want to get out of this life. What would your message be to them?
Look, what I would say is, you see, there's a lot of obligation and a lot of rules and a lot of backstory and history to a life like that. You don't just appear in a life like that. You have to come all the way through. And like I say, a lot of these, associations, as it was with us, we grew up together.
Yeah.
That's where the trust was, and the bloodline kind of stuff and all that, right? And look, it's never about, my experience, me, it's never about as bad as this sounds, or as crazy as this sounds, it's never about throwing people in or under the bus or anything like that. I was never that way.
Yeah.
And for people trying to get out of that life, I mean, you see, I've just done the Mafia series for Ross Kemp, a lot of them guys, right? Real,
Mm,
burnt the same blood oath, Italian, Sicilian Mafia going all the way back. A lot of them, they've all gone the other way. They're all jumping in. They're throwing everyone in. They're going into witness protection. I mean, look, I mean, that's down to them. Whatever they do, everyone's got their own choice.
mm,
But really, if you want to just change your life, change it, right? Change it.
mm,
Part of that is you're going to have to protect your own self. So,
mhm.
it's not about, it's very hard, you see, it's very hard. I remember I went to a person when I was, going through my transformation. He said, Steve, you only need to change one thing. I said, what's that? He said, everything. And I
Okay.
always remember that because
Mhm.
it's so true.
Yeah.
So, it's not about causing yourself unnecessary problems, is, what I'm
Mm,
saying, or
mm,
putting yourself or your family in danger. It's about
mm,
changing your life. If you have to move, you have to do whatever. You have to go say, look,
mm,
whatever I'm done with it or whatever, right? And then you just have to live your life. You may have to
mm,
change everything, right? That's the
mm.
price that you pay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Do you find it speaking out now? I mean, do you find you're looking over your shoulder? Do you feel in any way under threat for doing what you're doing?
No, I don't. I don't feel under threat. I just don't. Everyone dies sometimes,
Mm,
right? Do you know what I mean? It's about the work. It's about being authentic. Like I say, I know a lot. I've never been, a wrong un or anything like that.
mm, mm.
And even all the old school people, all the rest of it, they all know me here. I always had a good name.
Yeah.
Because I always done it in the right way, right? And there is a way to do it, right? And look, it is what it is because
Mm,
I have to be honest, a life like that, it's very dark, right? It's
yeah.
very dark. The outcomes are very bad, right? We all know what they are. I had many of them myself, but there are many people like they say, all right, I've played that game, I've lived that life or whatever, but I want to do something different,
Yeah.
right? If they can make a break in the right way, what I'm saying, maybe they have to move or do whatever they do. If they do it in the right way, then usually there's some kind of choice. Like, look at me, I've done all that prison.
Hmm.
I've done three other people's prison as well. By the way, I was released to Cat A. They don't give that to anyone who's playing that. I done it the hard way all the way
Mm,
through,
yeah.
but that was it for me. So I
Yeah.
was, you see, so that's how I done it. There's an example.
Well, I suppose you have a naturally, I suppose, some sympathy for people who end up in that life. But are you saying, um, ultimately, it's not a life worth living, and you should get out of it if you can, or are you saying it's possible to live that life? And
Look, it's not, of course, it's possible to live that life.
hmm
People are living that life all the time. But for
mm,
me, it was like an illusion, right?
mm,
And there's so many talented people, right? But like for me, I realized I don't need to go to the gutter to get my honor or self-respect, right?
mm,
And it's like I tell my children, I say, look, there are so many big people out there, people in film, people, yeah, business people,
yeah,
people making things, right? Building things. There are many, many roles you can take, many, many people you can become, right?
Hmm.
You don't want to pick the destructive one.
Hmm.
You want to pick the creative one that's given to the world, right?
Yeah.
These are there's amazing people out there, right? And we have our choice, right? We have our choices what we want to be, what we want to become. And there's something as well that's worth saying, right? I always say this as well because I learned this. This is my thing. Life, I've learned it doesn't give us what we want; it gives us what we become. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
think about it. It really does. So, we can make mistakes. Of course, we make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and there's a fall from grace. Some of these, sadly, we can't change. But what are you going to do next about it?
Hmm.
What's the next narrative? What's the next choice? What are
Hmm.
you going to become? We do have a choice with this.
Um, can I ask you, because I'm conscious I don't want to keep you too long, and it might be of interest to an Irish audience, but are you familiar with I mean, I'm sure you are in some sense familiar with the Kinahan cartel and how big they've become.
Look, what I will say is I know a lot of very big names over there. Let's
Hmm.
just put it like that. I've been in prison with them.
Hmm.
I've got other family, of course, I'm Irish, who are connected to other people, who are connected to other people, right? And all of that stuff. So look, I hear a lot of this stuff. I've interviewed, a lot of other people. I know a lot of boxers, a lot of world
Yeah.
champions and stuff like that who
Yeah.
know other people, right? Let's
Hmm.
say, right, are connected. It's
Hmm.
life. It's the way that it is, it's the way
Well,
that it is.
I'm going to slightly push you a little further if you don't mind, and if you don't want to go there, that's okay. But the likes of Daniel Kinahan or indeed his father, had you ever met them? Had you ever been in those circles?
No, I know people who are, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of narratives, right?
Hmm.
I know a lot of boxers and other people who will say another side about Daniel
Yeah,
and
sure.
people like that. It's
Yeah.
just it is what it is,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It is what it is, and there's a lot of stuff in the media, and people are going to make up their minds about all this kind of stuff, aren't they? You know.
Hmm. And do you have an opinion on that yourself?
Well, my opinion is the only opinion that I say is, and I'm not talking about anyone specifically, right? I'm really not. I just done that series. This is worldwide. We're talking about the mafia. We've done a lot of stuff about the mafia and all that stuff. Drugs is a bad thing on society, right? I'm
Hmm.
seeing and I've been through it all myself, right? I see it's destroying a lot of stuff, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of the children and all the rest of it. So I think this is a bad thing. That's all
Hmm.
I will say. Nothing to do with anyone or anyone's name or anything like that. There
Hmm.
are many people out there who are doing whatever they're doing with drugs or they're not. A lot of stuff that hasn't been proven as well, and a lot of hearsay and a lot of stuff that goes out there. But I can say that.
In terms of, I mean, in Ireland, we suffered a horrendous gangland feud. It was called the Kinahan Hutch feud. It was a feud between the Kinahan gang and the Hutch gang, and there are 18 people who were killed in that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and you're probably well familiar with it, but a number of people that were killed in that were very innocent victims. Two I can think of in particular. So there was a man by the name of Trevor O'Neill. He was a council worker, and he was just on holidays with his family, and he was shot dead because he wasn't actually the intended target, but it was a mistaken identity case. And there was a homeless man as well here on in Sheriff Street, Martin O'Rourke, and he was also caught in the crossfire, so to speak. When you hear about things like that, I mean, whatever about an issue, a feud between two organizations, when innocent people get caught in the crossfire like
That's a
that, does it?
terrible thing.
What
No
do you
one
think of
wants
it?
that.
Yeah,
This is a
yeah,
terrible thing, right?
hmm
And I have to say, from my understanding, in the old days, even people involved in it would not be good about that. As far down the path that they are, I'm telling you,
yeah,
that there are certain rules. Well, there used to be. They may have changed
mm
a little bit now, right? But that this is not a good thing, my brother. It's never going to
mm
be a good thing. That
mm mm. Are you? Also, just because we're speaking about Kinahans, a man by the name of Thomas Kavanagh. I don't know whether you know him, Bomber Kavanagh, but him and another man named Liam Byrne, they've just pleaded guilty in the Old Bailey to it's a rather bizarre firearms plot. Are you familiar with that at all?
Look, I am familiar, right?
Mm,
We see this stuff on the news, and it's crazy. You see a lot of stuff. All this, it gets very convoluted. And I remember this politics from the old days because everyone says, "Oh, he's a grass, he's a wrong, and he done this, and this is coming out, and all that." And you have to. My experience is you've got to be careful of all of this stuff. Who's saying what? Because it's very, very loaded. It's
mm,
very, very loaded. When this stuff goes to court, if there's evidence and people take a plea or whatever, then obviously, that's it, right?
mm,
Whatever's going to happen, they're going to be sentenced in the same way that I was. It's
mm.
a funny area with
Well, I mean, in this case, they've pleaded guilty, and the evidence
mm,
against them was on encrypted conversations, and I mean, that
yeah.
seems to be the way things are kind of going. Um, I mean, did that surprise you that people on that level of that seniority admitted their guilt and that they were involved in a kind of, and I don't know whether you've come across this before, in a conspiracy in which they essentially well, Thomas Kavanagh pretended to cooperate with the police, but it was actually all part of a ruse and attempts to get himself a lesser prison sentence.
Look, I'm not surprised at all if
Mm, mm,
that's the question. This is the
yeah.
way these things are. I've seen this before,
Mm,
many times, you know,
mm,
in the past, in
mhm,
cases, big cases, and different. I have seen it before.
mhm.
Whichever way it translates.
Do you think it's a clever thing to do?
Look, it depends. It depends your idea of clever, isn't it?
Mm,
I
mm,
mean, what I say to my child, I say, look, there's a lot of ways to be clever, isn't there?
mm, mm,
There is a lot of ways to be clever, right? Do you know what I'm saying? It just depends what is the motivation behind that cleverness and what's it about?
mhm. Um, do you? I know you're being cautious. You're saying there's a lot of hearsay and stuff out there, but there were sanctions imposed by the United States on the Kinahan cartel. That it's been named across the world as a organized crime group. It's recognized as such by the Americans, not just the Irish, but by policing organizations across the world. Is that not enough proof for you, or do you I like I'm not trying to speak for you, but are you saying there isn't enough proof, or just or what is
No, I
your
didn't say that at all. I just
yeah
don't get
yeah
involved in other people's business,
okay okay
and I'm very wise when I know that because I've been through cases myself,
hmm
in such a big case with such high profile people, and I know a lot of people. I hear a lot of stuff like you
yeah
know, the wise thing is, look, I'm not there to judge anything in a sense like that.
mm,
One, I don't know enough, and one, there is so much around of all of this stuff.
yeah
I
yeah
mean, it translates this stuff and it comes out in the end a different stuff, whatever it is or whatever it ain't. I've had my own, experience of going through the courts and all that. So if people, are innocent in some way, I'd like to think that comes out. And, if there's
mm,
any guilt on anything, then I'm pretty sure in many ways that's going to come out too, right? So,
mm.
that's really the answer to that question.
Fair enough. Did you follow the trial of Jerry the Monk Hutch and his ultimate acquittal of the Regency murder?
Do you know what? I actually didn't, right? I'm a
Mm,
really, really busy person with my own
mm,
shit, right? In many ways.
mhm,
No,
mm,
seriously, but I am interested in Ireland and all that. And look, of course, and I do know people, believe you me, it's not
mm,
about putting names down and all this stuff. But for me, it's all very sad, that people would lose their lives and this stuff would flare up.
mhm,
It's just all of it, right? That it has to come to this and people would lose their lives and there's all this, destruction and all that. I mean, surely everyone sits down, right? Even people involved in it and thinking,
mm,
none of this is good, right?
mm,
So that's the thing about it, that I have to tell myself this is the truth.
mhm. I mean, I suppose that's the sad end of I mean, that's the worst end of gangland crime, isn't it? Like whatever about enriching yourself and trying to make a life for yourself and for your family, but to get involved in murders and to I mean, this particular feud was a brutal one, and I mean, people who were targeted just because of their surname or even their association, even if they had no criminal involvement whatsoever, they were if they had any kind of tangential association, they were targeted. I mean, is that end of it? Is that the worst of it? And do you think that people who engage in that are they another level of criminal beyond, what you were even accustomed to in your time?
Look, there's a lot of different levels of criminality, right?
Mm,
Obviously, right? Everyone knows that. Excuse me. And but look, I mean, I've said before in interviews, right? The police, in many ways, back in the day for us was, yeah, of course, you don't want to be nicked and go to prison,
mm,
right? And all this stuff. That's terrible. But there were worse things, right? Than that, right? That's what this life unfortunately brings. It's very dark, and the outcomes, as I said, right? They're not good. It's not a good life, right? And you know, there are so many talented people in it, right? Who could have been anything that they wanted to be. It just so happened, even for me, we had them associations. We was brought up that way. We had all that stuff,
mm,
and that's where we found ourselves, right? Locked into to a life like that at a certain point. But it can change, right? You
mm.
know.
Well, I suppose the bigger thing I'm maybe getting at, and maybe it's easy for me to say because I haven't lived that life, but is there any point at which your moral compass is just like, no, that's a step too far, and that's that you can make that distinction, or is any person who's in that life destined to end up committing the worst of crimes potentially? I mean, does it take an extra level of I don't want to use the word evil, but to actually go and kill people without mercy is another step. Do you know what I mean?
Look, I would say, of course, that it does, right? Not
Mm.
everyone, has the capabilities of being like that or have been so far down the path that, this is what they feel they have to do, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It is what it is. It really is.
Can I ask you about just before I let you go? Obviously, you are doing a brand new program with Ross Kemp. Tell us a bit about that and where can people catch it?
Yeah, they can get that on Sky History. It's called Ross Kemp, Mafia in Britain. It was great working with Ross. I mean, I'm all the way through it. It was filmed in Sicily, New York, Colombia, Spain, and here, I'm very, very prominent in the first, series, obviously. Right,
Mm,
I introduced Ross. We've done some great work with some real old timers there. A friend of mine there, he's 99 years of age. Right, he was the right hand man of Billy Hill, who was a real godfather of London. He come before the craze, the Richardsons earned more money than the craze, and Billy
mm,
Hill earned more money than both of them put together. But it's about a history of how the Italian mafia, its infiltration into the UK, right, and stuff like that, what that was about, right, and all that stuff. And then it goes all the way through. It's an international series, it's a history series, obviously.
mm,
People can all also get it on Now
mm.
TV. It's very informative, right? It's amazing TV. It has to be said.
Did you find, I suppose, common threads in terms of how gangs operate around the world? Were there kind of key differences as well that were of interest to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's very much the same stuff, to be honest.
Mm,
Right. Yeah, there are different brands of it, and there are different cultural differences, right? And there are different structures, and there are, and different backstories, and there are different propellants, and it's very much the same, the associations are the same. There are cultural differences there. Of course, the propellants are the same. There's a lot of kind of poverty there, a lot of trauma, a
Mm,
lot of backstory and different stuff. There's a lot of the family issues, right? All of
mm,
us, we come up the bloodlines, the family stuff, right? That locks people in, you
mm,
know. The outcomes are the same, though, I have to say, right? There's a lot of insanity there. There's,
mm,
death and murder and all this stuff, unfortunately. And, the
mm,
same for, prison and all that. People that go to prison for a long time or the
mm,
rest of their lives.
mm. And I imagine that prison was quite difficult, but at the same time, for 12 years of your life, I mean, I imagine you got a lot done there. Did you get an education there? Did you learn a few things there? I suppose that helped you change your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried to do as much as I could. I mean, I done quite a hard sentence. We was in prison within prisons and all that stuff, and
Mm,
there was gang stuff in there still, and I mean, for me, I was a lot younger then, stuff like that. My way, I was a little bit disruptive. It wasn't the way to do it. It's just the way I survived to do it, right? But there you go. There's another truth. So,
mm.
it was a long time, under very, 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 very hard circumstances. But there were some good people in there as well, that I was
And
around.
you were with Charlie Brosnan for a time, were you? You knew him?
Yeah,
Charles
Charlie.
Bronson, sorry, Bronson.
Yeah, Charles Bronson. I mean,
Yeah.
look, all the people of the day, really. I was
Mm,
with so many people, Johnny Gilligan, all of these people. I was away with all of them right back in the day. A lot of names, right? It's not about the names,
mm.
it is what it is. It's just about the times, and them times are gone.
We're not talking about the same John Gilligan, are we?
Yeah, we're talking about the same John. Donkey. Look,
Right,
they used
right.
to mix us up on the visits because my name's
Mm,
Gilligan and his name's Gilligan. We was
mm.
both cat A's, but there was a lot of names there, right? When the because we was all cat A's together,
I'm trying to
right?
think of what he was in for at the time.
It was the
Yeah.
Veronica Guerin thing, right at the time, and he was there. He was there. It's going well back. He'd been deported from,
Oh, he was
and
on
he
remand.
was,
He was on
yeah, yeah,
remand.
yeah. He was on,
Yeah,
remand,
yeah,
and he was in England with us. Everyone was there. There was a lot of, big
yeah.
names there. We was all cat A's, right? There's just one name at
What was
that
it
time.
like meeting him? What was he? What kind of a character was he in your view?
Look, I got on with John, right?
Mm,
You had to get on with everyone in them places. I got on with John.
mm,
At that time, we had to survive. We had to get on with it. And he was, yeah, like I say, he was deported back to Ireland. Then after that, he went to Port right? He
mm,
was there for a long time. This is
mm.
a long time ago. These things, of course.
Did you ever uh, talk to him about Veronica Guerin or anything like that?
Well, you know, no is the answer because we wouldn't go into each other's
Mm,
cases and
mm,
stuff like that, right? There's no need to, pry into that kind of stuff. We still had
mm.
cases ongoing, and I was still. So there's a way of being.
It's because it's funny. It's interesting that we're talking about John Gilligan because in a way he is the polar opposite to you. I mean, you have left that life and he continued to live it and continues to live it. And in a way, I don't want to say he's gotten away with it, but he has continued to benefit from a life of crime. Um, so he might be one of the small examples of someone who has gotten to an old age and enjoyed some of the benefits. I know that he has had a hard time, and he did survive an attempt on his life as well. But is he an example, I suppose, of how you could survive that life? Do you still look at the what happened with him to this day? Are you interested in in what happened with him?
No, I mean,
Mm,
I met John in prison, obviously,
mm,
right? I've got my path, he's got his.
mm,
Really, we was never like, we got on because, we was in there and all that stuff because you kind of have to. But I don't take it any further like that. Like I say, people's business are their business,
Mm,
and like when it really comes down to it, of course, I have my choices, and he has his, right? I'm not there either way. I've never followed his story or what's really gone on with John. Apart from I know he went to Port and then he was released, right? I'm not
mm.
not quite sure what's going on with him
Well,
now.
he did a heavy sentence for drugs, but yeah, look, I mean, it's always been said that his gang carried out the murder of Veronica Guerin. Brian Meehan was the only man ever actually sentenced in relation to that, and the suspected gunman died. But it was always said that he ordered her murder, and um, it's kind of widely accepted that he did. Do you believe that yourself, or
Well, I've
does that
seen the
even come
film.
on your radar? Yeah.
I've seen the film.
Hmm.
I've seen the film. If you've
Mm,
seen the film,
mm, mm, mm.
yeah, I've
Okay.
seen the film.
Yeah, did you ever meet him again, or that was the last you were?
No, 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 no. This was the one time,
Yeah.
many, 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 many years ago. Like I say, this is in prison, right?
Mhm. And I'm sorry, I'm being cheeky, but just it's interesting because it's I suppose it's an Irish element as well. But um, I mean, you yourself were involved in organized crime at that time. I mean, did you recognize him as someone from your world and very much as you said, you got on with him. So he was of that ilk. He was certainly a gangster in terms of
In
your
them days, obviously so. Yeah,
yeah.
obviously so. We was all in there
Mm,
servants and sentenced
mm,
together. I mean, that
mm,
is the way it was. But this
mm.
stuff has to be said. It's a long time ago, right?
Mm.
And I'm not that person.
Well, John Gilligan's done
I've
quite a few interviews, and he actually has said he believes he's going to hell, and he does say that he has lived a life of crime, although he doesn't accept that he had anything to do with the murder of Veronica Guerin.
yeah.
Um, you yourself, you've had a chance to reform your life. So do you believe or hope that you've done enough to offset, I suppose, the bad things that you've done in your life?
So sorry, you just went a little bit off there again. Come back with the same question. It's a good
Sorry,
interview,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
just John Gilligan says that that he's going to hell, and he lived a life of crime, although he doesn't accept that he was involved in the murder of Veronica Guerin. But do you believe you've done enough in your life to offset the bad things you've done, that now that you've reformed yourself, so to speak?
God, I tell you, you've got some great questions, haven't you? Ah, deep, deep, deep and meaningful questions. Look, all of us, even yourself, right? We've all got to live with our own selves, or where we are, where we're falling short, what it is and what it's not.
Hmm,
I like myself today, right? And I believe life is obviously about growing, about learning, about doing better, about being better the next day, right?
hmm,
Really, we can't do any more than that, right? Do you know what I'm saying? And I try to be a good father today, like I do, and everything else that I do that's important to me. Very normal.
hmm.
I work very hard, and I keep it very straight. That was always me anyway. So that's it.
Stephen, thank you for your time. I didn't come into this interview with, and maybe it shows, I didn't have a set list of things I was going to ask you. I just wanted to see where it went, and I found it really an interesting conversation. So thanks for your time.
No worries, and yeah, thank you for the interview as well, and having a chat. Lots of blessings to you.